Hi everyone, thanks for following the blog. This is Green Perspectives. I'm Devin, and today I'm excited to share an interview with Dr. Carey King, a research scientist at the University of Texas at Austin and assistant director of the Energy Institute. Dr. King studies how energy technology and economics interact, exploring how our energy choice shapes society and the environment. So, Dr. King, my first question for you is what are the main trade offs society faces when transitioning to renewable energy?
Well, initially, there's, in some sense, not too many major trade offs if you don't have a lot of wind and solar energy. But as you install more, then the trade offs start to become issues associated with some things that are relatively obvious. The land use that it takes up as research continues further and people start exploring do how to perform other activities on the same piece of land, even if you have wind and solar on there, then opportunities seem to kind of arise more. With wind turbines, it's a little bit more obvious. You can obviously farm cows or crops around the wind turbines, so the land footprint itself around the wind turbines is relatively small compared to the total project area, we might say, so the total area among all the wind turbines. So that's why it tends to occur on ranch land and farmland. It doesn't hinder that activity much. It may have some impacts on some wildlife and wild birds if there's more of a wild area, such as ground nesting birds may be a little afraid of the wind turbine since they're afraid of things flying around them, trying to eat them. And there's trade-offs with some in biodiversity in terms of bats and seem to be attracted to wind turbines for some reason and die by various mechanisms sometimes, and other birds can happen as well. Solar panels, you can farm around them and you can raise sheep around them to eat grass if it's in an area that grows enough grass for sheep, such as Central and East Texas. Some of those trade-offs of land use can be mitigated a little bit by dual use types of situations from an environment standpoint. Pros are they don't consume a lot of water in terms of operating like a thermal power plant does. That needs water to cool off the power plants. And of course, they have lower life cycle carbon emissions than natural gas and coal-fired power plants, which is one of the main reasons why people are proponents of them. But some people are proponents of them, and say in West and North Texas, because they own the land and they're getting royalty rights for letting the developers put them on there, and they can make more money than ranching or farming.
Okay. So, what I'm hearing is that there's a lot of like integrating between farming and between like traditional farming, like with crops and animals, and energy farming as well. Is that really common today, especially in
Yeah, I'd say it's more common, and perhaps in Texas, of course, where I'm more familiar and kind of usually think in my head. Texas has a lot of, let's say, mostly private land ownership, and some of the land ownership is very large. Like a single person or family can own a very large piece of land in which they can have an entire wind farm or solar farm on their own property. So the developer only has to sort of deal contractually with one entity, one family, one person. As you get more in the Midwest or the Northeast and the Eastern U.S., where the population density is higher, then this becomes more of an issue, and can have multiple landowners potentially in conflict, some of them wanting a wind farm and some of them not. But for a developer to install a wind farm of some size, say 100 or more megawatts of wind turbines, they might have to deal with multiple landowners. And so then that could become an issue. There's laws, or if the landowners don't want to cooperate, and there's more laws in the outside of Texas in terms of or avenues for landowners to petition to not allow certain types of industrial projects by petitioning the county or something during a permitting process, and that occurs less. There's less ability to do that in Texas, so there can be that kind of a trade-off as well.
my next question, in your research, what lessons from the past should inform our future energy strategies?
Oh well, yeah, more than I know, certainly. One of the lessons from the past is that, and people are talking about this more now, but sort of those of us studying the energy system for a while, this is kind of a thing you hopefully come to relatively quickly is that for the most part, we're not getting rid of energy or perhaps even general material resources. We as humanity seem to expand and not contract. And in expanding, we just extract more things. So we haven't stopped, we haven't consumed less biomass or extracted less biomass annually from the environment, or less coal necessarily, or natural gas, oil, or rocks, anything. For the most part, some people might claim whaling would be one of the few exceptions, perhaps, extracting whales. But for the most part, we just keep adding adding more of existing types of things we extract, or coming up with new ways. I mean, solar photovoltaics would be a new way to extract sunlight that we've invented. Nuclear power, obviously. But these are sort of just additional energy resources for consuming more. And the challenge for thinking about the future is, should we just keep trying to do that, or do we actually have to consume less of some? For example, coal, if we want to deal with climate change, or at least install certain types of technologies like carbon capture system on coal or natural gas plants that sort of by definition in the traditional sense will reduce the efficiency of the power plant and therefore cause the electricity to cost more money. And that's the reason, of course, is to emit less carbon dioxide, which will be a harm in the long run if we do nothing. But that's in the opposite trend of how we've invented new technologies in the past, or a driver for inventing new technologies in the past, which is to increase the energy conversion efficiency of, say, burning fuel to produce electricity. So for the most part, history is making machines more efficient at converting energy into its output or work, we might say, if we're talking thermodynamics or engineering, how much work a machine is doing. And it seems, sometimes carbon reducing technologies are going the opposite direction in efficiency. For example, I mentioned carbon capture. And so there's a sort of a reason why those don't happen as much, making them more costly and less profitable, or just less economically attractive. So that gets into government regulation and these kinds of things to push technologies that are sort of specifically not immediately profitable, but might have a social benefit in the long run.
So one of the things that stood out to me was you said we haven't been getting rid of energy sources like gas and oil, but we've been adding several, like what did you say, the new solar?
Yeah, or just adding more ways to get oil out as well, I guess, would be an example what I mean. But yes, and then we've also invented new technologies like solar and wind turbines have been around for a while, but at least those that generate electricity at scale have been around for, decades, not centuries. Wind turbines have been around for centuries that are just purely mechanical for grinding grain, something like, or pumping water. But yeah, so the idea a lot of people have is, hey, if we invent these technologies like wind and solar power, increasingly combined with batteries, then these can displace the need to extract other types of resources like coal or fossil fuels. And just to date, that hasn't happened. They've just been additional ways to consume energy rather than pure displacement.
I see. So that kind of leads into my next question. What are the biggest challenges in integrating renewable energy into existing energy systems?
Yeah, so the challenges in terms of the grid are some electrical engineering challenges, trying to predict or forecast what the wind output is going to be or the solar output is going to be at different time scales in the future, such as even perhaps several seconds ahead or a few minutes ahead, and even up to a day ahead, maybe a week ahead. So there's a different sort of horizons that are of interest, time horizons that are of interest to people whose job it is to operate the grid and keep the electricity flowing. So there's forecasting, and then there's understanding what happens when power plants either go offline because there's a mechanical malfunction, any type of power plant, or if, yes, it's just not as sunny or as windy in the next hour or the next day as you thought it was going to be when the time comes. And then the question is, do you have other ways of providing that electricity than what you had previously planned for, which was solar photovoltaics or wind. And so there's different ways to do this. And very few of them are specific to only wind and solar. People will call these intermittent or variable, which just means you can't exactly predict the output of the power plant. But it doesn't mean they're completely unpredictable in the sense that Earth rotates and the sun's going to shine on this part of Texas tomorrow. We just don't know how many clouds are going to be in the way. So that's predictable in that sense. And to deal with these things, there are other power plants on the grid that work in cohorts. So the electric grid really is a system of different types of generators that you have to really think about how they all work together. And this is a difficulty in discourse, is that people that are pro-renewable might not want to talk about the other power plants. People that are anti-renewable energy might want to just say that wind and energy need their own backup, independent of any other power plants. And I find that, that's generally not true. The system as a whole needs a set of reserves or backup power plants. And that amount of reserves or backup, yes, can change as a factor of the mix. So it's sort of intuitive. If you have more wind and solar, then you might need more batteries or other types of power plants. And historically, you've had zero. Let's just imagine Texas, 25 years ago, there was effectively no solar and no wind, but we still had backup power plants. So the fact that we have backup power plants now because there's wind and solar isn't only because there's wind and solar, it's because there's power plants that might go off at any moment's notice. For example, nuclear power plants, there's a specific protocol for having a certain amount of backup power plants just in case one of the nuclear generators goes off in Texas. So that's one that's not specific to nuclear. It's just specific to the largest power plant, which happens to be nuclear. If it were a coal power plant, it would be that one. So so that's kind of the challenges. One of the increasing challenges with wind and solar is that this gets a little bit engineering-ish, but they have less inertia, or they have very low inertia or mass, if you will. So imagine, I guess you don't maybe drive cars yet. But you've been in a car soon, and a larger car might takes longer to slow down if you just take your foot off the accelerator and keep rolling. With the wind resistance, it keeps going, and the reason it keeps going and slows down slowly is because it has inertia, and so the wind's fighting against it, but it takes a while to slow down. So in some sense, the heavier you are, the more aerodynamic you are as well. Of course, you'll continue longer before you come to a stop. And so having high inertia means that if you have a low inertia, it means you'll come to stop quickly, or the wind will stop you quickly. It's like a piece of paper just trying to go against the wind. It doesn't have a lot of mass. It has a lot of wind resistance, and it'll just stop moving pretty quickly. So as you have more wind and solar on the ground, you look more like a piece of paper than a big car rolling down the road. So if something does happen on the grid, the speed at which the issue propagates becomes faster and faster. And the faster the issue on the electric grid propagates, the faster all other mechanisms have to be to correct it. And at some point, they might have to be so fast that it's not engineeringly feasible. And at that point, there may be a halt on how much wind and solar can be integrated into the grid, such that technically there might be wind and solar farms out there that could produce more electricity and put it in the grid, but the grid operator might tell them not to because they're afraid there's not enough inertia, and they'll have other power plants generate instead, like natural gas or coal and nuclear. So that's not a situation that absolutely has to occur. There are other engineering fixes and batteries and power electronics to sort of make it as though you have a synthetic, if you will, or a fake inertia that works engineering-wise. But these are all new techniques and not as well proven out, and that's part of the engineering task, is to figure out how to keep integrating one of them, to integrate more wind and solar in light of these issues of inertia and intermittency.
Okay. That's really interesting, the engineering aspect of it. Um, that's something that I've never thought about. So that's
Right. Well, I'd never thought about it at your age either. So,
yeah. But that's really cool to hear, and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. So you said that, of course, there's days where the sun doesn't shine as much on the solar panels, or that it's not as windy of a day. So are those the times when the backup generators would be um, kind of replacing the energy that would be coming from the solar and wind farms?
you can imagine that there are power plants kind of available. Let's think about a summer day where we think there's going to be no clouds in Texas and it's really hot, but then there are clouds for some reason. There already are power plants that the grid operator plans to have sitting ready to generate if so needed. And depending on where you are in the country, uh, there will be different rules about how much power plants get paid to do this, but they will get compensated something to do this, usually. And so then if it's cloudy, then there's less solar than you thought, then these power plants are kind of ready and they will generate some electricity. Whereas if it was not cloudy, they might have generated a very low amount of electricity, or they might not have even been turned on at all. So there's just different sort of levels of this backup. There's different types of backup power systems. There's different types of rules, if you will, and there's a yeah, they are created to operate on different time frames. Like you need to come on one to change its generation in 5 minutes. You need it to change its generation in 30 minutes, an hour, or 4 hours. So these kind of time frames are relevant for the people that own power plants because if you want to turn a power plant on from scratch, if it's not on at all, for example, it might take 4 hours. You can't do it in 5 minutes. But if the power plant's already on and you just need a little bit more output from that power plant, it can do that in 5 minutes. So it just depends on, I guess there's a mix of backup solutions, I guess.
And is that something that they're always measuring, the amount of energy coming from the wind and solar, and then based on that, that's how they decide, or will they predict how much energy they'll get on a given day, and
Yeah.
then based on that, uh,
Depending on how much you want to get into it, and if you want to do a live sharing of your browser or something like this. So, a great place to learn is the ERCOT website, and they have a series of figures on there, graphs, which kind of tell you the state of the grid, right now, whenever you look at it in real time. And they're saving these data, so if you're a researcher, you can go through some effort to download these data. One of the things they put on there is what's called the grid frequency, and you may or may not have heard of this. If you ever heard of people talking about the grid frequency or something.
okay, it's pulled up here.
If you look at it, it shows you how much wind and solar is coming out in that upper right one right now in megawatts. So it's mostly solar and not that much wind. But you got 25 something gigawatts of solar output before the sun's about to start going down, and that'll go down. But if you scroll down, or there may be hit view all dashboards. So this tells you a lot of things. So operating reserves, I talked about these power plants that are sort of available to generate. It's telling us that there's 12,000 megawatts of operating reserves. So if they're sort of there waiting for the solar to go down to some degree in general. We know the solar is going to go down here in a bit because it's almost 5 o'clock. So some of it's out in West Texas, so there'll be a little delay from us here in Austin. If you scroll down a little bit more, then there is this frequency one. See if you can find it again. Keep going. Sorry. So this squiggly, go right there on the right. This squiggly up and down line. It's all the far right. This squiggly line, it's the frequency. This is kind of the turquoise line there. It's always around 60 hertz or Hz, so that means 60 times per second. So this is essentially the fastest signal or the main signal that the grid operator looks at to determine if the grid has enough power generation relative to us wanting to consume electricity. So technically, if I turn off my little light here, I have lowered the demand for electricity a little bit, and the frequency would have gone slightly up because I turned off the light or the load. If I turn it back on, I'll need a little bit more demand, and in principle, the frequency would have gone a little bit lower. Something immeasurable on this graph. But if this number, so basically the grid operator is every few seconds trying to tell power plants what to do automatically to some degree based on this frequency. So this is the shortest time frame in which we determine whether the grid is operating properly. And in 2021, during the freeze, the hard freeze in February of 2021, the power plants started failing and this grid frequency started going too low. And if it goes too low for too long, then the entire grid goes into a blackout.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't know there was so much that went into it. Like,
Yeah, so this is a great place to just sit there and learn, and you look at prices and you look at how the storage systems are operating, you look at how much generation is coming out. You can save some of these data. There's weather forecast. So all kinds of information. There's the prices. They're very low during the day. See that the price, because the solar is sort of dominating the price of electricity, and then when the sun goes down, other power plants will start to affect the price, and the price will goes up.
okay, I know I've said this before, but I've never thought about this. So the price of energy goes up at night. So if you're using lights at night, like Christmas lights, for example, will those be more expensive at night?
Now you're getting into how we're charged for electricity versus what this is showing. So you and I sitting here in Austin, Texas, are not the amount we pay for electricity is not directly tied to this graph. It is sort of indirectly tied to this chart. So we get charged the same amount for electricity for the most part, no matter when we consume it.
Okay.
And the company Austin Energy, which is the municipal utility, who we sort of technically, as citizens of Austin, we're sort of technically part owners of this utility. They sort of average out these prices for us over the course of the year. So we're not directly exposed to this price. Some people did have electricity contracts that was directly tied, say hour to hour, on the price of electricity, like you're seeing here. But the price of electricity went very high during the blackout for reasons that are perhaps too complicated to go into here. And then after that, the Texas legislature made a law that said it was not legal to make those kinds of contracts anymore. So some people think that was a mistake and we should allow them. Some people don't think it was a mistake and a good idea to stop allowing them. But that's, again, a lengthier discussion. But this is how people who own and operate power plants and have to purchase electricity to sell it to us, how those companies, this is the type of price signal that they have to pay attention to and think about how it occurs over the course of an entire year or maybe even a decade to understand if their power plant's going to be profitable or not.
Okay. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen
Yeah.
here.
You can imagine the batteries are, when the power is cheap, they want to charge their batteries, and when the power is more expensive, they discharge the batteries. So it's a classic buy low and sell high strategy. So
Okay. Okay. My next question is, what emerging renewable energy technologies are you most excited about?
well, the one that's I guess we sort of maybe, I don't know, we haven't really passed peak excitement of solar photovoltaic panels, I guess, but they've been around for a while and pretty well established how they operate and at least how to integrate them into grids to a pretty large extent, not 100% electricity from wind and solar, but particularly here in Texas and other places, the renewable technology that's getting a lot more interest from investors and trying to demonstrate feasibility is geothermal power and what people might call enhanced geothermal power, which effectively means using the same techniques associated with hydraulic, basically using hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling. So the same techniques that have enabled lots of oil and gas extraction to come out since the late 2000s, or in the 2010s, that makes the United States the number one producer or extractor of oil and natural gas. So basically applying those same techniques for geothermal extraction for generation of electricity. So you can go deeper and you can go into certain kinds of rocks that were inaccessible before in the technical sense, that we didn't have the technology to drill there, and it made it uneconomic. So now we have the technology, and the question is, the companies are trying to make this economic so that you can use geothermal wells to have low carbon power that could maybe maybe you start displacing our the fossil fuels in the electric sector a little bit more. So yeah, so this enhanced geothermal power is kind of the latest. Well, it's not a new technology, but applying the hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling is beginning a lot more interest over the last, for sure, 5 years. And so a lot of progress has been made over that time.
And would you say the geothermal energy, is it profitable? Because it's been used in the grid, right?
Right. Well, it has been used. Most of them are uh, that has been profitable. It's in the western part of the U.S. I'll just take the most easiest example, which would be Iceland. I mean, Iceland is, for the most part, a volcanic island, right? And so geothermal power is a relevant share of its electricity generation. It's mostly hydropower and geothermal power. So they don't have to drill very deep, and the rock is very porous, so it's easy to get relatively easy or cheap to get the heat out because you don't have to drill deep, and it's a high quality thermal reservoir when you're near when the magma lava is near the surface, which is so this enhanced geothermal is specifically trying to seek out areas where you just don't the heat is just not as near the surface, and it's not as hot. Whatever heat is, it's just not as hot. So traditionally, it's been profitable or potentially profitable near volcanic areas and geysers, but not this enhanced geothermal. So that's much more accessible in places around the world. So that's kind of the excitement if you can get that to become feasible technologically. And it may, who knows what the costs may end up being. They may be higher costs than solar on average over the lifetime of the power plant, but because it's can have a much more predictable output, sort of turning up and turning down and on demand, even though it's a higher cost, it may produce a high value to the grid for that purpose.
Where do you see the greatest opportunities for young people interested in renewable energy and business?
Right. Well, they really are as a young person, if you know something about engineering, I think, and yeah, I mean, kind of as you say it in business, and maybe as we're getting here, a little bit more of a big data kind of data management, some basic programming knowledge, and you kind of have the skills to make an impact in the energy industry. It really is kind of a mix of these skills. Oftentimes, whether it's in hydrocarbons extraction or renewable energy, people often tend to have a mix of these skills. Maybe you have to get an advanced degree, maybe not, depending on how early you start. But that's probably more of a key than anything. And as much as countries or regions push for decarbonization, the challenges are very much are sort of a combination of technology and business, sort of business model challenges. The more policies there are to push forward decarbonizing energy production, in some sense, the less prepared the technologies have to be if there's government incentives to make it profitable. But if the government incentives are not there, then a lot of people don't want to start businesses that depend upon government incentives because you don't know how the government is necessarily going to view things differently from one, at least at the federal level, presidential administration to another. So we've definitely seen those changes over as we've gone from Donald Trump to, even President Obama to Donald Trump to Joe Biden to back to Donald Trump. So that's definitely changed a lot. as you go among these presidents. So a lot of people and investors will be quite shy on depending on incentives. So if you have a technology that's showing steady progress, decreasing the costs, then they can start to go, okay, this is getting somewhere. And obviously, if you don't need incentives to be profitable, then that is going to attract investment, or which attracts people to work at your company. And so yeah, that's kind of the high level challenge. Some people think we can decarbonize the energy system by just making better technologies and making them profitable and low cost. Some other people are a little bit more skeptical because traditionally that's what we've done. We've made over time more technologies, lower cost. We, humanity here, and we've just consumed more of them as we started our conversation. And as we consume more of them, we're not actually decreasing consumption and we're not decreasing carbon emissions. So you just have more stuff. And so this is our challenge. Some people think that eventually we will turn the corner on having enough technologies that are low cost and low carbon that it'll start to bite into the high carbon technologies. So that's what I like. I try to study. I try to understand how to model that and how to understand this process, how this process is occurring, this addition process is occurring, and whether this addition process can lead to decarbonization and how it affects the economy more broadly. So it's exciting in the sense that there's more technologies and they have more capabilities, and so there's more options, and more options gets harder to study, which if you're excited about studying it, that's the exciting part, is that you get to try to hopefully figure out how it works and inform people, as opposed to it being easy to study. So it's getting a little bit harder to study, but if that's fun for you, then that's the opportunity.
Thank you for that response. That's something it's really important for me, because that's going to be hopefully something that I'm able to pursue a career in, and something that I also try to raise awareness and teach other people through my blog.
Well, I'd say what you're doing is you are taking advantage of the opportunity by talking to people like me and others. So good work. You're way ahead of where I was at that time by a long shot.
I just have one last question for you, or not exactly a question, but you're super knowledgeable in this area and you have a lot of expertise and research. Is there maybe just one thing that we haven't talked about that you've learned from your research that you think would be important to know?
Right. Well, I guess I could plug my book for while I'm here, but I do have an answer. So you can send me your information offline if you'd like. I can send you a book. But yeah, so I wrote this book, The Economic Superorganism, for perhaps people like yourself who are inquisitive about energy and want to know some details about it. So it's kind of a background on my viewpoint of where we come from and how to think about going forward. But to answer your question, one thing I tell students in a class I teach, if they remember one thing from the class, it's the idea of what's called the Jevons paradox. And it's named after a guy from the 1800s in Britain named William Stanley Jevons, who was an economist studying coal extraction in the United Kingdom, who was the first industrialized country using steam engines. And he's essentially the first person that we're aware of who came up with the idea that when you make the engines more efficient in terms of using less coal to get the same amount of power output from a steam engine, that it doesn't reduce the amount of coal you consume, it increases the amount of coal you end up consuming, because now you've made it more profitable and you've made it, you require less coal to run the steam engine, which helps you get the coal out of the ground itself. And because you're more profitable, you can make steam engines more cheaply and other iron products more cheaply, because you can make the coal furnace more cost efficient and more energy efficient to make iron, because you would use coal to reduce iron oxide to make iron products like steam engines, train engines, rails, and industrial equipment. So as you get more coal efficient or energy efficient, things become more profitable. You invest and you make more steam engines, you make more coal foundries, And by making more of these things, instead of having one steam engine and one coal foundry, now you've got two. Two consumes more than one. And that's what we've seen ever since. We have more buildings, more houses, more people, more cars, more planes, and we consume more energy. So each one of them gets a little bit more efficient, but we accumulate more of them in total, and that's the that's the challenge we face.
That's super interesting. Well, thank you for your time. Just this has been. I feel like I've learned a lot here. I really appreciate you talking to me and answering all my questions.
Right? Well, thanks for calling me up and interviewing me.